So we've got turmoil in the French government. So we've been unable to form a government. There has been an announcement from Macron saying he's going to name a new prime minister. We've got Alex joining us here today, who's going to help shed some light on the situation. Alex, can you give us a quick summary of what's going on here? It seems like there's some turmoil in French politics.
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me. And well, to sum up, the situation is kind of chaotic, to be honest. First, what you have to know in order to understand the situation is that a few months ago, the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, decided to dissolve the parliament. And so that led to an election, and the results was that there were no major party that had the majority in French parliament. Therefore, there was a big question of who could lead, because in our constitution, the majority party in the parliament chooses a prime minister, and the president decides to name that person prime minister. So this is in our constitution. But because there was no majority, there was a big confusion on who should propose a name, who should decide, and who should have the lead on this one. And so it went on for for a long, I would say, for a long time. And President Macron decided to name Michel Barnier, which was the current, well, the recent prime minister. He was from the right, I would say, right wing party, not the far right, but on the right side of the political spectrum. And
So this would be kind of like in our world, this would be like on Trump's side of the fence, right? The far right. That would be kind of like
uh,
what the president.
difficult to no.
I would
No,
say
that would be more like I would say more Biden. I would say Biden or Hillary,
I was
like
yeah,
center.
I was gonna say a neocon because what was it? Was it forestalling a shift to the right? Um, is this the
Well,
reason that Macron called a snap election?
well, the election happened at the beginning. Was the decision to dissolve was that um, for him, according to him at least, he was dissolved in the European elections, which saw a huge surge of the far right movement led by Marine Le Pen. And so he decided like to dissolve parliament, and there was, well, maybe not the brightest decision, because once you do that as a president, you cannot do it again for a whole year. So we have to go through again and again and again this kind of process where there's no majority, and they have to get along. And of course, French political parties right now do not get along. We have the left, the left that is quite organized and decided to form, because there were four parties at the beginning, and they decided to merge into one big movement, not one big party, because there are still some big key differences right now, and a lot of them do not get along, and this movement that they created just for the election might just be dissolved in a few months or a few weeks. So Macron decided to really pick out someone that he felt was able to compromise and to bring everyone together. Michel Barnier was known for his, well, he led the Brexit negotiations. So he was, which was clearly in favor of the European Union, and so he was known for being a tough negotiator and someone who was able to bring difficult parties together in order to form a compromise. However, the issue lately has been around the budget, and how many how much money should be allocated to which minister, that kind of thing.
Well,
For
and sometimes for Americans looking at this, it seems like it's hard to understand what the fight's really about, because what your budget is off by something like 6%, and when America is facing this outsized crazy budget deficit and we just print our way out of it, that's not an option for France, right? You can't just print your way out of it.
No, that could not be an option for France, because uh, the deficit has to stay within limits. So, because we're part of the European Union, the EU has some rules regarding budget deficits from its for its members, and so we have to stay within the margin, in order to to follow the rules of the EU. And also because there was a the budget was not so much in deficit when Macron became president, but because of COVID and his decisions to, for example, to allow huge amount of money to be given to workers during that time of year, that led to an increase, of course, of the deficit. And so it's a huge fight because political parties in France do not agree on how they should deal with the budget. Some say we need to be, of course, strict. Some say that there is no problem and we need to give more money to some I would say some ministers. So it's kind of a big fight because they don't agree really on what to do with it, because um, it depicts their visions. For them, the budget depicts their visions of what France should be. And so there was a vote in Parliament, and the political parties decided to have a vote of no confidence against the prime minister, and Michel Barnier was voted out. So we're in this situation right now, if you will, of well, who is he gonna name? Who's the prime minister? And what's the budget's gonna be? So this is the situation, quickly summed up, of course.
What about how is how what is the political what is the political temperature regarding the NATO's war with Ukraine? And well, let me ask you that now, just to begin with. How is the conflict with Russia and the United States being played out in Ukraine? How is that portrayed? What does France think about that overall?
Well, I mean, I think it's a common. I think it's the one issue where they all agree on. It's the fact that we need to support Ukraine. We need to give more money. We need to give more weapons. Of course, they want to help Ukraine as much as they can. So it's actually maybe the one issue on which they kind of all agree on.
And when you say they, do you mean your political candidates or the French people?
Um, I'd say both. I'd say the French are on this issue not divided. Yeah, there might be there are a few issues where they're not so much divided on, and this might be one of them. They see that it's very hard to know what exactly is going on, because it feels like we're being told that Ukraine might lose the war, but we're also being told that the Russian economy is in peril. They might not get out of it. So kind of in states where, well, should we help them? Should we send more money? Should we send more weapons? And I'd say that the whole war in Ukraine has definitely engaged a long process, a long thinking process by the EU members on their own security. Definitely, and it's been a huge talking points where um, few issues that have risen up. Of course, for example, is the budget for the army. Should we increase? And the overall result and the overall, I want to say, uh, feeling, maybe of the French people is that our army would last maybe a month or two or three in this kind of war.
And what do they think about the conflict in Palestine?
Well, I'd say they're more inclined to protest against Israel. You have to understand that a lot of uh, so there are about 68 million people in France, 60, 67, 68. I'm not, I'm not sure. I'd say around, and out of those, you got maybe 6 to 8 million Arabs. So you have to understand that there's a huge community that actually feels very strongly about the Palestinians, and they're and they see it as being a really a carnage. It's a massacre, really,
How
and they call
how
it.
how how strong is that group politically? Like, are they pretty politically active? Do they have a strong voice within the French
Well,
government?
well, it's funny because I'd say the French government and Macron especially has always tried to be an ally of Israel. So they've condemned, of course, but they've condemned also attacks on Jewish people, for example, in France, and they've always mentioned the fact that, well, there is a strong hate right now against Israel, and so this feeling that they have, this way of thinking that they have, does not relate really, truly, I think, to what the French population thinks about the situation, which is, of course, that's any attacks on any groups based on religion should not be allowed, and on that we all agree on. However, there is a tardiness to recognize the massacre that is going on. I mean, the Palestinians are getting massacred on that, and so uh, you have a few politicians on the far left, especially, that have made some very strong remarks, and you would think that the French would follow and would be a proponent of international rule, for example. However, I don't know if you read anything about that, but I thought that was quite interesting. Is that recently the International Criminal Court, they have subpoenaed, I think, they made a they've requested the arrest of the Israeli prime minister. Don't know if you follow that at all. And so the French government said, well, because Israel is not a member, has not signed the treaty for the International Criminal Court, even if they were to come, you know, next to, or to come on on French territory, we might not be able to arrest them.
Yeah,
So,
Gallant, the Secretary of Defense for Israel, is in Washington D.C. as we speak, and the United States is also not
I
arresting.
remember, yeah.
Yeah, not arresting him or sending him to the ICC. But no surprise there. Like we,
I wonder if he's in danger because of recent developments with what's happened with the United Health CEO. If we're into a new situation of the citizens of the United States starting to take the law into their own hands, I wonder how much that calculus is coming into play with the defense of somebody like that being in the United States.
once we shift norms, I mean, how many self-immolations had we seen since the 1970s until last year? So once somebody opens the door up for some of these things to occur, there are billions of people in the world, and ideas are infectious. But Alex, also in the wake of the discussion about Palestine, or the question about Palestine, how about the developments in Syria? I mean, that is a former French colony.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what sort of agreements or alliance there was between the French government or France and the Assad regime, but how is the French public and the French ruling class or the politicians, how are they? What remarks are they making with regards to the developments in Syria?
Um, well, mostly celebrating. I mean, I don't think any of us, and I'm including you guys. I'm pretty sure nobody saw that coming. I mean, make a sad, to make Assad's regime fall under, 11 days. That was something that nobody saw coming. So most of us, we kind of, I want to say, they were celebrating that kind of uh, happening, and kind of worried on to maybe what's going to happen next. Who's this new leader? So there's been a lot of news about two things. There's been a lot of news in France about the new leader. Uh, who is he? What did he do before? When he was in Al Qaeda, what kind of regime he set up uh, in the Idlib region. So there was a lot of news articles. I want to say videos about that. And the next piece of news about Syria was kind of about I want to say Assad's regime itself, the prisons, how many people were there, what were the conditions, the torture, that kind of thing. But I'd say most interestingly, the recently and I thought that was really quick, and I don't know if you followed that at all, but there were at least four. I want to say four EU members that have stopped really giving visas to Syrian refugees, and one of them, I think, started a process to send them back. So it might play on a more immigration issue, even in France, because we have welcomed a lot of Syrians. Concerning your question about the closeness, maybe the proximity of France and Syria, I would not say that we're close. I think we hold a more. I think we're closer to Lebanon in that region, definitely. And I don't think there was a part of the French government at any point that just celebrated Assad. They were skeptic when he came to power, and he introduced himself as a someone more modern compared to his father. But that quickly led to the reality that it was torturing his people. And yeah, so I think we kind of all um, even Americans, even France, I mean, even I'll say Europe, was kind of glad that he was at the forefront of fighting ISIS. So, I mean, for a few years, there was kind of this relief that, oh, yeah, we're not going to critique, we're not going to condemn so much Assad because, he's doing the dirty job for us. Well, at least that's my opinion on this. I don't know if you agree with me.
There are two things that really surprised me about. I mean, yes, I was absolutely surprised to see Syria fall, but in the wake of that, I was surprised to hear that one, this was an operation that was planned between the United States, Turkey, and Israel, but was supposed to be launched in March of 2025. But because Trump was coming into office, the Biden regime escalate or brought it about before Biden left office to ensure that it would happen.
Accelerated the timeline because they didn't think it was going to happen if there was a change in leadership.
And the second thing, which Grant, I haven't shared with you, I just was reading up on breaking info, so unconfirmed, but Russia was informed of both the plan and the accelerated timeline by the Chinese, who were listening to all encrypted conversations of the United States and NATO. And my take, whenever I saw one, that Assad was brought to Moscow, just the way that it played out, leading into that conflict, the abandoning of Syria. I also wondered if Russia was focusing its efforts on the conflict with NATO, and given the divisive nature of the Palestinian conflict in the countries of Europe, both due to the refugee populations there, or the Arab populations that have moved into Europe, but also because of, I don't know, the identity crisis of of the politics in the Middle East. I've wondered if Russia was wanted that to be more chaos, to cause more division amongst the NATO members.
To me, there was the role in Russia here was. I feel like it's a loss of power for them, and you might not agree with me on this one, but here's my reasoning. I I see it as, well, Assad's regime maintained itself at some point because of Russia and Iran. I think on this one we all agree on. And I think at some point, if you take a look at the recent events, well, Russia did not have that much power, or especially that much airplanes to give to Assad to to let him survive. I feel like the rebels attacked at precisely a point where, well, Iran would not engage directly, would use Hezbollah to do his dirty work, and Hezbollah is already engaged in a war with Israel, and so and let's face it, his it's most of its commanders have been decimated. So, in order to organize a true response and go to Syria, that would have taken maybe years or months at least. And Russia is so engaged, and we have so many reports of Russia demanding more and more manpower in order to go to Ukraine, that I think they didn't have any to give to Syria. So in a way, to me, this is a huge loss of power, and because I think they're going to lose the two major uh, military bases that they had in Syria. There's a strong chance that it might not help them connect to Africa, where they kind of send their troops. So I don't know. To me that there's a major loss for Russia, and if it's calculated, I don't see the upside for them. I mean, chaos, sure, but the region is already in chaos. It's been 20 years, so
Well, I think it brings us back to the snap election in France, the annulled election that occurred in Romania, the riots in
yeah.
Georgia, um, the open revolt of Hungary and Spain, and all of this with regards to the EU. Are you familiar? What is the narrative, I should say, of censorship in France today? Is it a topic? Are people sensitive to I don't know, Luxembourg-driven censorship or state censorship, or
Mm, uh, it's a tough question. Well, first, you're always going to find people sensitive about this. And you're always going to find some people that say that in France, in particular, there is a strong censorship from the government. Um, I don't know how much that is true, though. I don't know how much that is true. There's a strong influence. There's a strong influence from other countries, definitely, from Russia to China, for example. There was a story that was a kind of a I don't know, that was kind of scary, but China is putting pressure to French museums to change the nameplates of some of the artwork, especially when they refer to Tibet, for example. So that was kind of scary, and Russia's been kind of trying to influence our presidential election, parliamentary election, all kinds of elections, and we don't know how much they give money to groups in order to do that in our territory, and certainly there are some people that relay those messages. We had the case of a French journalist from the channel is BFM, yeah, and that was clearly paid in order to play stories, through the channel uh, that would put Russia in, good light, I would say. And so I don't know how much, when you talk about censorship, do you talk about the French government saying you cannot print that story? Because honestly, journalists have a lot of freedom here.
I was thinking. I'm afraid that it's more United States driven censorship that is occurring in Europe. And
Mm, okay.
well, when Brexit occurred, um, the United States State Department, our foreign policy camp were very concerned about, and this was in 2016.
Mm,
And they were very concerned about the rise of populism in Europe.
yeah.
And Grant, I put a link over on the side of the Gerasimov document, and the United States adopted a policy of that it was going to be easier to control elections than to fight wars.
Mm,
And the United States began to participate in a concerted effort to drive the narrative in Europe against the populist movement that was
mm,
occurring there in the wake of Brexit.
mm,
And as I look around and get reports back, from Ireland, uh, from the response to state action that's been going on in especially Britain with regards to censoring speech for people who are protesting either for Israel or for Palestine. It's been a very divisive issue there, but just broadly across Europe, the members of the Eurozone, Euro, there is a huge populist movement that seems to be surging there, and has come to the fore in France. So, and I think it's part of a broader failure of the United States to maintain the narrative that our fight with Russia is good for everybody, and France has been somewhat insulated from that with regards to their energy independence because of their nuclear power production. But I don't know. That's when I look at Europe and see what's going on, that's where my I keep wondering, like, if more countries have populist governments that come in, what's going to happen with NATO, and what's going to happen with the Euro? And so when I see the actions of Macron also in calling that snap election, it seemed to me to be to try to embrace someone who was right, but not too far right, to cut off Marine Le Pen before she gained more popularity.
I think I understand what you're saying. Well, first of all, I see that you've put up the Gerasimov Doctrine, but I think you would be well into reading two doctrines, because there are two doctrines that are regarding Russia and the way they see the world. The first one is the Primakov Doctrine, that was written in the 1990s, and the second one is the one that is quite recent, that just recently came out only a few months ago. Karaganov Doctrine, if you're interested. It's a document that was recently translated into English, and that sum up the need for Russia to diversify its alliances and to try to form a bloc against Western countries. And maybe this is where I link up with you with this idea that maybe the US might have done better if they had ready up more countries on this side of the argument. Definitely. Regarding the surge of populism in France or Europe, has been coming up, and they ride on this wave of I want to say unhappiness, general unhappiness from the population regarding different things. Too much bureaucracy. Recently, we had a few of the agricultural sectors that that went on strike and want to go on strike regarding their conditions. So the general unhappiness comes from, well, we're not getting paid for what we do, and our government don't seem to care or do anything about it. There are so many rules that we have to follow. We pay so many taxes, but our living conditions do not improve or worsen in some cases. And so I think the populism rides on this stuff. However, we've seen with Marine Le Pen and her party, for example, they're not ready for power. So I think there's a lot of people in France that do believe in their theories, their arguments, their their projects, but they don't so much believe in them being ready for power. And we see that with some of the members of a party that were elected to parliament, and there are a lot of scandals, or there are a lot of people that just appear to be incompetent. And so there's this question of is her party ready for power? And if she's given power, what is she going to do? But the problem is that more and more people are saying, well, you know what? I don't care how ready she is. Maybe it's time we let her, have the power.
And what is Marine Le Pen's stance towards Germany? You know, in the wake of the global financial crisis of 2008, um, the eurozone was put under a great deal of stress by Italy,
Mhm.
by Greece, by Ireland, and by Spain.
Mhm.
And Germany and France joined hands and towed the line
Yeah.
to drag or to bring the euro, you know, to bring everybody back to the table, back into line.
Mhm.
If that happens again with a populist or a quote unquote right government, how what is Marine Le Pen's stance towards Germany and towards the euro?
Mm. Well, what I'm gonna say is not gonna be so much of a surprise to you guys. She never has been a huge fan of Europe. She never has been a huge fan of Europe. However, I think she's come to realize the importance of having a united Europe, and most of her allies uh, are not the traditional allies of France. And I mean in that regard, you said Luxembourg, Italy. Well, Italy lately, yes, uh, with their prime minister. But traditional allies, and her traditional allies are more other populists like Viktor Orban, Hungary, or with Poland. So I think she recognizes the need for Europe. She recognizes the need that, and she recognizes the fact that their friends might not ever leave the European Union. But she feels that I think she feels that power might shift, and in order to make Europe great again, I want to say, uh, it can
There,
only come with a
there,
new
there are echoes of
attitude.
American politics that I'm hearing in many of the things you're
Yeah,
saying, Alex.
yeah. Well, I mean,
The
it's
parallels are
always
there, are they not? I mean, because it just sounds like so many of the things that you're saying resonate with American politics.
well, it's not so much of a surprise. I mean, there's always been an influence, right? I mean, it's always been two-way street, and Germany has always been a very strong pro-US. I mean, kind of European member, and there's been quite a lot of discontent on both sides. I mean, regarding France and Germany lately. So because Germany is also in turmoil with Olaf Scholz, the chancellor, that is not in a strong position right now, and might need to call himself, some elections.
I really like the acronym for "Make Europe Great Again." Um, that's pretty beautiful, and there is always a lot of mirroring between our politics and your politics. You gave us the concept of liberty, one of Americans' defining notions. Um, what does France think of Trump? Are they more warm to Trump this time? Do they think Americans are crazy, or how do they look at our last election?
Well, I mean, definitely crazy. I mean, that's that's not even a question. I mean, we definitely think you're crazy to go that road again, but uh, we're kind of worried on
Well,
the effects.
let's stick on that for just a second, because one of the things that we talked about on our show, and I brought it up, and I think Lucas and I had a bit of a disagreement on this, but we saw in some of the polling, and I took it to mean when the polls came back and said that one of the big topics in this last election was democracy, and I took that to mean that the fact that we didn't actually go through a political process within the Democratic Party left many disaffected,
Hmm.
and that itself was off-putting to a significant part of the electorate. And I saw it resonate within social media. So I think, to the extent that, we have one party that seems to be very top down, heavy handed, has blocked candidates, a significant number of times going back,
Hmm.
at least several elections here. And again, in this cycle with Kennedy, I think that this is finally starting to come to a head. And I think if the Democratic Party doesn't change that direction, that they're going to keep losing because of this. And so when America picks, somebody like Trump, I think partially it's a rejection of this top-down, heavy-handed, not allowing candidates to actually run and
Hmm.
allowing for the political process to play itself out the way it's supposed to.
Hmm. I, I I think I get what you mean. I think I understand. I think I understand. I think I agree with you. I think well, at least in my own opinion, I truly believe that the Democratic Party in the U.S. should question themselves regarding their conduct during that election. And for us in France, at least in Europe, at least there was laughter because we had images of Biden doing old man stuff and kind of like not remembering who he was, and was like, then it was kind of scary. There was relief when he announced that he was not going to be running for president. Um, and again, I think, and again, there's maybe this echo or maybe this parallel that we can draw on between France and between Europe and the US, is that we didn't know Kamala Harris so much. I mean, she was pretty discreet during the 4 years she was vice president. So we didn't know her, and we didn't know what she was doing, what she thought. We always thought that, well, there was a huge, it's going to be pretty much, Biden part two. I mean, that's pretty much the feeling that we had regarding her, and um, and there was a huge relief from Europeans when Biden was elected, because during the 4 years Trump was president, the first term, I'd say, uh, most European countries and even Germany, was a strong ally to the U.S., started to say, "Well, we need to take our destiny, take back, the fate of our countries, and not let the U.S. be just the umbrella that protects us from everything." So uh, this process of becoming one's own man, if I could say that, was stopped when Biden arrived. And it would be I'm quite interested in seeing maybe the process being picked up again. And I think that is what Macron is trying to do. And Germany is, through Olaf Scholz, is trying to slow this process down. But I feel like there's a divide in Europe regarding this, especially with the role of NATO, because we have a lot of members of European members, let's say, that are in need of this protection, And it's funny because I feel like in order to not give in order to not give any arguments to Trump about the usefulness of NATO, they started to pay more, well, to pay what they should pay. The 2% that Trump is requesting from each member. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. I just and we do disagree slightly, Grant. I think that we're going. I think one. I'm always wary of the words democracy, authoritarian, or autocracy. We live in republics, and whenever ideals that are different than reality are floated in front of us, I'm afraid sometimes we're being sold a song. But whenever I see where the Democrats are coming in, I think we're going to see the Democrats come in at a populist. We're already seeing Califrexit, and and we're going to see more of it. We're at New Mexit and Colorado.
Texas, the original. They've always wanted out.
Well, and if Democrats rise to power in Texas, it's going to be on the narrative of autonomy, and stepping
Wait,
back from.
are you linking autonomy and Texas together? This is the first time I heard that association.
Right. Yeah, I'm in Texas, Alex. So
No, I mean, whenever I teach Texas teach Texas, I teach about Texas to my students. I will say, well, I mean, they want to be their own country. They always have been wanting to be their own country. So I'm not surprised so much.
I mean, Texas is more set up for departure than any other state, and that goes to a long identity. But they also have a very large size, and they keep their energy grid as independent as they can. They have their own bullion deposit of gold, so it's always lurking in the mind of Texas somewhere.
Yeah.
But we may see it happen more quickly in especially California, in incredibly blue states, and the Republican Party. The Republican Party claims to be about states' rights, but it's about enforcing the rights of citizens through the power of the federal judiciary. So, as long as there's that relation between Texas and the Republicans, then Texas will stall out on their Texit. In Texas, I don't know if you guys saw, but recently the leader of the Texas House of Representatives was replaced, and that's been an insular fight going on here too, but a very I should say a bulwark of the neoconservative Republicans that were leading the state was removed and replaced with a very populist candidate, and so that leaves only our governor, who is in the camp of the neoconservatives. So, and which also leads us to something that's been interesting going on here, and that's a shift in the Republican Party. To the more populist, the MAGA, the Tea Party side, wrenching the control out of the hands of foreign policy hawks.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned this shift, because years ago, and Grant could tell you, we had this debate many times about the future of the two major political party in the US. And we always thought that, well, he always said that they're gonna divide into two, and there's gonna be not two but four major political parties. And it's funny, because I feel like the radical left through Trump has definitely taken out the regular well, air quotes here, Republicans. And so I definitely feel like the Democratic Party will divide in two. And maybe you're right with California being maybe the first step in that divide. But I think the Republican Party will stay one block, well, at least for a while.
I
Let's
don't
see
know.
after.
I'm into, there we could see, and it's interesting how the issue of Palestine and Israel actually is also incredibly divisive between both parties here too, because Trump both floats policy agendas that run right into the arms of, or the knit and mittens of Bernie Sanders. But
Yeah,
he also has a incredibly pro-Israel cabinet, and
yeah.
so that could, I wondered at some point before he had selected his cabinet if the Bernie Bros of the Democratic Party would jump into the arms of MAGA. But now I don't know if that's going to happen. So Republicans love their they love the power of the judiciary, and it seems that and they love to think of the federal government as a business, and they are very much doubling down on those ways of seeing the world, whether it be um, trying to make America great again by abusing foreign states, or by abusing their own. So.
It's funny that you mentioned that, and if I can give you some references from French politics about that, we have seen over the last 10, 20 years radical left members leaving their own party to join up with Marine Le Pen on the far right.
Yeah, I mean, I
That
I
could
think
happen.
it also comes back, it comes to these notions of immigration.
Yeah.
And Trump and Marine Le Pen line up, and they are nationalists. They want to stop immigration. But it's also interesting that that Trump begins to float the notion of removing birthright citizenship.
Mm.
And like he wants to remove birthright citizenship for children who have been born in the United States, but parents were not citizens. But if you
Yeah.
carry that a little bit further, I think you could meet up on policy solutions that satisfy um, the left and the right sides of the spectrum. But that gets to a very transactional notion of how we live in the world. And some might say
Well, but wait a minute. I mean, we kind of saw that with the formation of the Unity Party that occurred within just this recent election. I mean, I really don't see the election that just occurred as being just this hard right election because of the coalition that was brought together to win this election. There are a bunch of high profile Democrats that essentially defected into the Unity ticket.
Well, and I think it's also, I think that we should think of that election in terms of whether our focus was going to be inward or outward. But then you get a, if you're what what I I I think that I don't know how to put this, Grant, but yes, it was unity, but look at how the unity ticket agreed on foreign policy, especially with respect to Israel, and how that was not um, that was not aligned with the no more wars ideal that was voiced by both the far left and the far right in America.
I,
And
I just think that that's one of the areas where the compromise didn't play out the way that had been wanted. I mean, there were certain things that definitely Nicole Shanahan and Bobby Kennedy and others really wanted, but I think that that's just part of what gets lost when you're forming like a big coalition. Like not everybody gets what they want, but you know, what's the alternative? The alternative is that you know, the Democrats were definitely hard leaning into, well, this is just going to be more of the same foreign policy. And I don't think that Kamala Harris in any way was saying, hey, we're going to be the party of peace. Like that wasn't touted. That wasn't said at all. Like they said, we're going to continue with the same foreign policy that we had under Biden. And certainly under Biden, there was no, you know, thought that peace would prevail. And Trump had repeated several times that he's the only president that ended war, that tried to resolve conflicts. I mean, he did say, I want to try to resolve this Ukrainian thing,
Guys,
like
if I
as
could jump
quickly as
in
possible.
just 1 second, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to leave you guys. So
No
I
worries.
wanted.
We're just at the top of the hour anyway, Alex. So thanks for joining in. Maybe that's a good place to call it anyway, Lucas, because we're starting to get into some deeper water here. It might be best done on a different show. Who knows?
Sounds
So
good. Alex, thank you so much for coming on. Enjoyed
well,
the discussion.
you're welcome. You're welcome. See you guys. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, and we'll see you tomorrow on FOMO.